Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how fated raids are going to work in Season 4. Again, how Season 4 is going to work for raiding, essentially. For Mythic Plus, there's a new affix, there's new dungeons, but it's going to work the same. For PvP, there's pretty much no changes. So this is about raiding, specifically here for Season 4. Now I'm on Blizzard Watch here. They have a nice article here that I think is the best comprehensive put together list of things that I've seen. Maybe Wowhead will do that next week. I know they're mostly focused on the alpha and stuff right now. Normally I would be on Wowhead, but I'm here on Blizzard Watch reading this article here. So it's called How Fated Raids and Rewards Will Work in Shadowlands Season 4. So Shadowlands Season 4 starts at the first week of August. You might know that part if you don't know anything else. And this is how fated difficulty is going to work. It's similar to, but not exactly the same as Mythic Plus Dungeons. A way to get better loot and some difficulty scaling of raid content, especially in the period of Shadowlands where we won't be seeing any new raids. So how are fated raids going to work? If you're wondering what the schedule, okay, so first the schedule. So if you don't even know the schedule yet, this was put on Wowhead and other places. But starting August 2nd, the first day, Castle Nathria is going to be fated. And then it's going to be Sanctum the next week, Sepulture the next week, and then repeat. Nathria, Sanctum, Sepulture. And then they don't say when, but at some point, all raids are going to be fated at the same time. Meaning, what does this mean for you? So like if you're still trying to get Sylvanas mounts or Jailer mounts or whatever, you'll be able to do those. So like this August 2nd week, Castle Nathria is fated, but you can go into Sanctum or Sepulture on its regular difficulty, the difficulty that it's at right now, and go in there and still obtain those mounts, at least from my understanding of it. So you could go through Castle Nathria on Heroic, get all kinds of new gear, or normal, whatever, and then go into, Mythic Sanctum or Mythic Sepulture with higher item level and attempt to clear those raids with a little bit more item level. That's something you can do. But at some point, you're not going to be able to do that anymore because all raids are going to be fated. While a raid is fated, it'll only be available in fated difficulty. So when Sepulture is on fated, so the third week, unless you can clear Mythic on fated that week, you won't be able to farm a Jailer mount that week, essentially. And eventually they'll all be fated, but you should have item level. Like they're not trying to make this difficult. Hopefully they actually make it on the easier side, since it's not like a cutting edge or anything like that, or AOTC. There's no new AOTC or whatever. So hopefully they make it on the easier side, but we'll see. So that's the first. We've heard about this, but we'll eventually be expected to transition to current raid difficulty to earn to fated for all Shadowlands raids. Yep, that's what I just talked about. Multiple tiers, the item level. So here's LFR or item level stuff here. If you're wondering, it's kind of like a normal tier, right? So LFR is 265 base, Sepulture 278 on normal difficulty. Nothing to do with Sepulture. I was reading the wrong line there. Normal difficulty is 278. Heroic is 291, and then 297, obviously for the end bosses. And Mythic is base 304. So base now is 278, 304. Yeah, this is a substantial item level game for sure for this. The difficulty of this week's fated raid, of any week's fated raid, is also increased. Whether it's Nathria, Sanctum, or Sepulture, expect the fights to just plain be harder, so they are going to be scaled up, even without the affixes. Things like damage to players and health of bosses will be increased, making each fight just plain mathematically harder. But in addition to that, there'll also be the affixes. And we're going to get into these fated affixes next, but I do want to talk about this because this is the number one thing people seem confused by. The raids are going to be scaled harder, just like a normal tier. So when you go from Nathria to Sanctum, Sanctum is just harder. Bosses have more health, they hit harder, mechanics do more base damage, everything's harder. These are going to be scaled up in the same way. Similar to how Mythic Plus dungeons are scaled up every season, or dungeons are scaled up every season. Now, we don't know how much they're going to be scaled by, though. Could they be scaled less than a normal raid tier because there's less time? Perhaps. The affixes do give you strong buffs, so maybe not. And we'll get through the affixes. but we don't know exactly how they're going to be scaled. So this Mythic Sepulture, for example, could be just as hard as Mythic Sepulture is right now, which of course it's very nerfed, but it could be the same difficulty as it is right now, or it could be at like 80% of the difficulty as it is right now once you have the same item level equivalency that you have right now. And, you know, it can be a bit confusing if you haven't put much thought into it, but it's going to be very interesting to see. And then with Castle Nathria, for example, we have much more borrowed power than we did in Season 1. We have double legendaries, we have set bonuses, and we have more soulbind power than we did in Season 1. So if Nathria is even scaled at its normal rate, so like the rate that Nathria was scaled to Sanctum, if that is the same level, we'll actually be much more powerful than it because of all the borrowed power that we have that was not available to us in Season 1. So could they overscale Nathria? Possibly. I hope not. They would also then need to slightly overscale Sanctum and then just normally scale Sepulture if they wanted it to be difficult. But we'll see how they go here. What I'm expecting is that Nathria will be kind of easy, Sanctum will be medium, and then Sepulture will present some sort of barrier. That's my guess. Nobody knows. So how the faded powers actually work. So what are the faded things? They're just like affixes. There's Chaotic Essence, there's Creation Spark, there's Protoform Barrier, and there's Reconfiguration Emitter. So let's go over what these different things do. They all give you nice buffs when you deal with them. So we'll start with Chaotic Essence. Chaotic Essence begins casting Chaotic Destruction. So I assume this is just like a thing that spawns, kind of like if you think about in Plaguefall with the good doctor and his cauldron or whatever that is going to blow up if you don't kill it in time. This is how I envisioned Chaotic Essence. I didn't test it out myself, like on the PTR or anything. That's how I envision it by reading through this. So, which will eventually blow up the raid if it gets its cast finished or whatever. So that's why, you know, it pretty much sounds the same as that. Trying to stop it causes motes, causes to summon motes, and every chaotic mote spawned by the Chaotic Essence channels damage to nearby players. The goal seems to be kill as many motes as possible while working on the Chaotic Essence, getting a stacking buff of 2% increased damage and 2% increased healing done, and 2% absorb done for 25 seconds. So you get this really, really strong buff. That buff stacks up for every chaotic mote killed before the end of the 15 seconds from the time the Chaotic Essence arrives in party. It feels like the goal here is to get everybody as much of the Chaotic Essence buff as possible, essentially fighting hard to keep the Essence from casting Chaotic Destruction and getting as many motes dead as can be arranged. Going into later stages of the fight with 20% or more bonus damage, healing and absorbs for 25-second period is like a defense and offensive cooldown at the same time. So essentially, you're pausing from what you're doing. Obviously, you're still going to have to do the mechanics of whatever's happening on the raid boss, right? The raid boss mechanics will still have to be dealt with, but there'll be this essence that spawns. You'll want to send as many people as you can to deal with this essence and buff your entire raid, and then go back to doing the boss with this huge buff on you. So effectively, you are wasting time dealing with this thing, but then getting a buff that's more than worth the time that you wasted to put back onto the boss to make the boss easier. You know, min-maxing this, obviously you might be trying to like do stuff at a certain time or whatever. It seems like this is a pretty short duration. Based on what I was reading here, apparently it lasts 15 seconds only. So it's a very short duration. It's like a quick switch and burn. Again, just based on the reading here. And then get your buff and go back to what you're doing for the normal raid fight. The next one we're going to talk about is Creation Spark. So that's, they said 20%, they said or more. So I don't know how many of these motes you can get, and it lasts for 25 seconds. So it's like a pretty strong thing. Like you'd want to pop your Bloodlust or Heroism, you know, after receiving this buff, right? Faded Power, Creation Spark. This Faded Power should be familiar to you if you've done the Venthyr Council fight in Wrath of the Lich King. I actually did, but I don't remember it at all. A player gets charged up with a stacking damage over time spell that must be removed, but when it does, it spawns Creation Sparks to target random parts of the map and must be soaked by players. They'll buff anyone who soaks them for 20 seconds, getting a 15% speed increase and casting speed, attack speed, cooldown recharge, and the speed of your damage and healing over time ticks, as well as a 45% movement speed. And this one stacks, so it can kill people very fast. So essentially, it sounds like this one is you have to. I do remember the fight a little bit. So you have to catch these sparks that are falling from the ground, and when you catch one, you get a buff. And if you get too much of that buff, it'll probably kill you. But you can also potentially stack those. So you could stack those probably on like warlocks who have very high survivability. But yeah. Just like in Wrath, if the spark reaches the ground, it explodes, damages everyone. Quite painful, so don't do that. So that sounds pretty normal. So 20-second buff there. It's huge 20-second buff. This one sounds really good for especially casters, really. So this might be one you want to get on casters specifically, but attack speed can help other people as well. Melee as well, too. Faded Power, Protofoam Barrier. This faded power is a little hard to explain, but not too bad to contend with in practice. The boss summons a pulsing damage effect that, when removed, forms a barrier that shields pretty much everything trying to kill the player, so like everything in the raid encounter that's an enemy, with an absorb shield. There'll also be an NPC that spawns, and they can be healed to bring down the shield. So this is like a healer affix. The healers have to just nuke this thing down, right? If nuke this thing up, I guess. If the players don't get the shield down, it blows up and inflicts damage to the whole raid. But if you get it down first, it blows up and hurts the enemies instead. And also, the player gets a 25% buff to damage, healing, and absorption for 40 seconds. Again, something that sounds like it lines up really good with a Bloodluster heroism, if you're able to do that, right? So this is an insane buff too. Faded Power Reconfiguration Emitter. Drops an incredibly annoying NPC emitter into the fight that constantly tries to cast spells, which will deal a lot of cosmic damage to the entire raid if successful. The emitter can't be hurt until you hit it with an interrupt, which will deal a little damage to your raid, but keep the whole of your raid from taking a lot more damage. Once the emitter is beaten, it gives the whole raid 10% mastery, 10% verse, 10% crit, and 8 avoidance. I don't know if that's correct. That sounds like a very low amount of avoidance. Only 8 avoidance, maybe 8% avoidance. But you'll get a bunch, just a huge buff to your secondaries apparently. Remember, these 4 fixes will only be applied 1 per raid, and they contain a buff mechanic that rewards players for learning the mechanics and devising a way to deal with the raid almost as if it's in a new place. We're talking about gear here. So those are the affixes. They are just Kiss Curse things. If you follow Mythic Plus, a lot of times they're referred to as Kiss Curse, these positive ones. So like in this current one, you defeat a Woe Relic, which does a little bit of damage and stuff. None of the relics are too frightening, so the curse isn't that bad. But you kill a Woe Relic, and then you get this super speed buff and damage reduction buff. You kill an Relic, and you just have to survive that does do some tank damage. You have to survive the Relic, and then you get a huge cooldown reduction. Or you kill the Vi Relic, and you get a huge haste buff, right? So a very low curse, very high kiss in that case. And hopefully that's what we see here. Hopefully these are easy to deal with for raiders. And it can be like a low negative with a high positive. That's kind of what we want to see there. Season 4 prevents a unique opportunity for us to try some experimental changes that might be volatile for a regular season, but could still provide us with valuable data and feedback that we can use to improve the game long term. It's worth noting that the systems we'll be talking about today are designed around specific goals to fit with Season 4. It's very possible that even if they're received well, they may undergo significant iteration to match the cadence and intended progression of a normal season of content. Basically, even if these Donars are really loved, if they do bring them back, it might not be like as lucrative as it is in this shorter season. For example, if the season's 4 months and you get your Donars, let's say in 4 weeks, and the season is 6 months, you would get your Donars, let's say in 6 weeks instead, right? Just to throw out random numbers. That makes sense to me, and I'm fine with that. But I do like the Donars, and we'll talk about those a little bit here. Donar. I think they were Donars at one point. Maybe they're Dinars. As part of the season, there are special broker vendors who can be found outside of each raid, and which sell weapons, trinkets, and other items from 3 raid instances boosted to normal faded raid eye level. The catch: these items cost a puzzling cartel dinar, 1 dinar per item. Once you've gotten and spent 3 such puzzling dinars, the vendors go away and you can't interact with them anymore on those characters. That means you can use the puzzling cartel dinar to fill any gaping holes in your inventory. Getting and spending all of them too fast might leave you with an item you wanted the first time and now have to drop several times with the item you ended up wishing you had can't be acquired because you spent your dinar too early. I disagree with this for the most part, especially for melee. I went over the rep paladin stuff on a video. You want to use your first dinar if you're looking to do max DPS. You want to use your first dinar on a gavel and guarantee that you're going to have a mythic gavel. You want to use your second dinar on a old warrior soul and guarantee that you have a mythic old warrior soul. And your third one doesn't matter as much because it'll be accessible via raid, but your third one you probably want a first sigil to guarantee that you have a mythic first sigil. If you get your mythic first sigil before you get your third dinar, then oh well. If your third dinar ends up being wasted as you're still upgrading it and you get the sigil, oh well. But that's generally what you're going to want to do, like as a rep paladin only. For other classes, maybe what they're saying is more valid, but for others, it's not. Fury Warrior, you're probably going to want to get Gavel, Jathis, Old Warrior Soul, right? Pretty easy. You'll need to kill various faded bosses while their raid is faded for 1 week. So can't just blitz through all 3 raids for maximum dinars to earn 1 dinar. The exact amount of bosses you need to kill is still a work in progress. It's being adjusted so that you should take between 4 and 5 weeks to get all 3 dinars. So let's say after 5 weeks, you have all 3 dinars. That means that you have, I'll just use my example. I'll have, at week 5, I'll have a gavel, I'll have an old warrior soul, and I'll have a first sigil, and I'll be working on upgrading those to heroic or mythic item level. You'll also be able to upgrade your normal faded items to heroic or mythic levels by killing heroic or mythic bosses. Each boss will have a 100% drop chance of the material, the upgrade, and you'll require 20 of these materials to upgrade a single item. If you routinely clearing heroic or mythic difficulty, you can even have enough upgrade shards to buy a normal item for a dinar, and then immediately upgrade it to heroic or mythic. So that's how the faded raids will work. Okay, so that's just the end of it there. So that's how the dinars basically work. You will acquire the stuff for there's quests, I believe, to acquire the dinars. They're going to take 4 or 5 weeks to get all 3. The first one you'll be able to get pretty quickly, and then you'll get the second one slightly less quickly, the third one even slightly less quickly. So let's say at 5 weeks, maybe it'll be 4 weeks, but somewhere in there, you will get your 3 dinars. You will already be upgrading one of the dinars and one of the dinar items that you received first, most likely. And then you will have 3 of your most powerful items ready to upgrade and guarantee that you have them at the highest difficulty that you raid at, essentially. So this also makes it much more worth it for you if you are a non-cutting edge guild, right? So maybe you're a heroic guild that does a couple mythic bosses, or maybe you are a mythic guild who doesn't, quite reach cutting edge. You'll still be able to get a mythic gavel or a mythic Rygalon dagger. You'll still be able to get those. You'll still be able to get a mythic Sylvanas bow on this tier. But you will just have to kill some mythic bosses and acquire and save up the materials. So you could just kill the first 3 bosses on mythic on each raid until you get up to 20. So I guess that would be 7 weeks. If you only can kill the 3 bosses after 7 weeks, you still could upgrade, in theory, your item based on what I just read, up to mythic difficulty or up to mythic item level. So it's a way for everyone to get 3 best in slot pieces, essentially, if they want them. So it's definitely a good thing. That's basically how this works. I know a lot of people are confused about it because they still aren't even done with it yet. They're working on alpha. I'll say that, but that's how it's going to work. It should be. I'm hoping that they don't make it overly difficult. What I think would be cool for this is if, in this case, since there's no cutting edge there's no rewards attached to it, right? There's no new rewards attached to it. I think it'd be cool if they kind of just made it a way for people to kind of just get a bunch of really cool gear to go into Dragonflight and let maybe less hardcore raiders, less high-end raiders also get that gear to go into Dragonflight with. I think that'd be kind of cool. So that's what I'm hoping for. But who knows? We literally won't know until August 2nd, I suppose. So yeah, hopefully this could help anybody out who's confused about it. I know there's lots of people confused about it. And hopefully this was somewhat enlightening. Yeah. And, you know, I expect Wowhead to maybe do some kind of post on this next week, hopefully. And yeah, that's it for this one, guys. As always, I do ask you please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out so much. Other than that, everybody, have a good one.